What is sexism? Sexism is prejudice or discrimination based on a person's sex or gender. Sexism can affect anyone, but it primarily affects women and girls. It has been linked to stereotypes and gender roles, and may include the belief that one sex or gender is intrinsically superior to another. Where does sexism come from? The history of sexism. The term sexism emerged during second-wave feminism, paralleling the term racism. This was by no means the first time sexism occurred. From its earliest inception, women in the United States, as well as in many other countries, were considered wives and mothers foremost and lacked the equal rights as those of men, in areas including everything from education to voting. Sexism is even embedded in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence, for example, states that all men are created equal with no reference to women, one of the first instances of explicit sexism in the United States. Until the Married Women's Property Act, passed in New York in 1848 and copied by other states, married woman's property was considered that of her husband, not herself, limiting women's mobility and rights in society. With the exception of some states, which passed suffrage laws in the decades prior, women were not legally allowed to vote until the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. The women's rights movement, which sought to gain equal rights and status for women, allowed women to make significant strides in terms of their political, social, and socioeconomic status. Previously, women could not hold the same jobs as men, and today occupy many positions only men could hold in the past. Elizabeth Blackwell, the nation's first female physician, earned her MD in 1849, while Jeannette Rankin became the first woman elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1916. Although 1961 was the first year women could attend Santa Clara University. However, sexism persisted even after second-wave feminism of the 1960s and 70s, which include the failure to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Today, women continue to face sexual harassment at work and beyond.
A problem that we discovered is that too often the female athletes receive comments or jokes that equate athletic ability and performance with gender, which is exemplified through a comment that our interviewee overheard made by one of her male teammates, saying, "The best girl on the tennis team couldn't even beat the fifth best guy." Often, the women's tennis teams receive training and physical therapy from less experienced, second-tier individuals. For example, the men's basketball team has a dedicated trainer, while the women's tennis team often has interns and trainers that are typically in training themselves, rather than working for the sole purpose of maintaining the physical health of the women's athletes. Further, the men's teams often practice longer and harder than the women, and in one instance, the men's coaches coached the women's tennis team, and it was obvious that he was going easy on them and babying them during practice. It was received as the coach thinking the female athletes were not as athletic, therefore were treated differently during practice. At Santa Clara University, females are typically the obvious minority in classes, much like other universities in the United States, and sexism can be witnessed in several ways. One example is that the answers given by females are sometimes not taken seriously by other male students in the class. Also, in group projects and labs that required volunteering for leadership positions, the males are typically chosen over females and distribute the more complicated tasks to the males in the groups. So there's a feeling of being a step behind just because of gender for the females. Lastly, a lot of people's first comment when discovering that the girl is an engineering student is, "Wow, that is a good field to get into. They need more women." And it's assumed women would be exploited in the workplace due to the misconception that females are not as smart as their male counterparts. This ultimately lowers expectations for female performance, and this in turn reinforces their minority status. We found that discrimination is more apparent in the earlier years of engineering at SCU, when the males are often unacquainted with many of the female students. This is when the biases are most apparent. However, when the peers are in classes together more frequently and the females are able to prove themselves, the playing field becomes more level because the professors and peers begin to recognize the skill and intelligence of the female students. So any discrimination becomes more ambiguous and presents itself in more subtle, less serious ways. Girls are constantly being analyzed at parties and in other social environments, usually through a male lens of sexuality and objectivity. This is perpetuated by men and forces women to feel like their appearance and objective attractiveness is what is at the core of their self-worth, and not by who they are as a person. Girls have to be conscious how they present themselves at a distance through what they're wearing and how they're acting, and not conforming to these societal expectations can put girls at a social disadvantage in terms of building relationships and making friends. The girls who are dressed the most attractive or the most sexually are often the girls that are invited to participate in certain social events, and this further perpetuates the idea that in order to thrive socially, they must dress and act accordingly. It is exemplified through the quote of our interviewee, "Even if I do not care what other people think about how I look, people will still judge me, and that's the hardest part." The Mali Fitness Center has never allowed exposed midriffs and trunks within the facility. However, there has always been a bit of a double standard when it comes to enforcement of this dress code, and we know this from personal experience. Men were allowed to wear tank tops with much of their oblique areas exposed, and this was never met with reprimand. Girls, however, have never been allowed such privileges and leniency, and an incident that occurred in 2016 with a freshman student sparked a school-wide debate when she was not allowed into the fitness center due to her exposed midriff being against Jesuit values. While it was later discovered that said employee's interpretation of the rule was incorrect, it still highlights the innate preconceived notion that many individuals in this Mali employee have, that a woman's midriff is hypersexualized and the same area of exposed skin on a male is not. This further perpetuates within girls that they are being analyzed sexually almost constantly.
Solutions to sexism at SCU. The first solution proposed to help combat sexism is to conduct regular awareness-raising activities on everyday sexism, such as a forum theater on sexual harassment. One of the biggest issues with sexism on campus is the lack of awareness by all genders of the student body. Sexism is usually overlooked by other facets of oppression and oftentimes get put to the wayside in favor of combating racial and cultural biases. An example of an awareness-raising activity are forum theaters on sexism. Forum theaters begins with a short performance, either rehearsed or improvised, which contains demonstrations of social or political problems. At the conclusion, the play will begin again with the audience being able to replace or add to the characters on stage to present their interventions. Alternate solutions to the problems faced. Forum theaters are great activities that allow for students to get involved and actually seek out solutions to sexism. The campus community can use their collective minds to really flesh out the problems and seek proper solutions through forum theaters. A second solution proposed to combat sexism is to bring in female professionals in their STEM fields to discuss challenges and other gender-related issues they have faced in their careers and how to overcome said challenges. Calling upon women in STEM to share their story encourages current female students and provides a role model for sticking up to sexism. Leaders can discuss how sexism has affected them and will shed light onto male students what they can do to eliminate subconscious oppression. Not only is this beneficial for females, but also for male students to realize their own biases and ultimately can lead to a better collaboration in group projects and in the workforce. Furthermore, this solution is another avenue for women to be seen as equals and capable of any aspirations post-college, regardless of how gendered an area of employment might currently be. A third solution is the creation of a sexism monitoring unit dedicated to addressing sexism on campus. This student-led group could be formed to create a welcoming and trusting environment to voice concerns about sexism on campus. It can also conduct sexism awareness by putting on various activities to get the student body more educated and aware of the oppression throughout SCU. The Sexism Monitoring Unit is a great way to get more people involved in a forum in which sexism can be discussed in an open and free manner.
Given that we are a Jesuit university, there are a couple Jesuit values that we are responsible to uphold in order to improve our campus and our community. The first is the idea of the cura personalis, or care for the individual person. We are to treat every single person as a child of God, and gender differences are not reason enough to disregard this value. The other value is ad majorem Dei gloriam, or for the greater glory of God, as well as being agents of change. which means that we should be teaching and upholding behaviors that reflect critical thought and responsible action on moral and ethical issues. And when we see something that does not conform with this, it is our duty to do our best to change the situation for the better. Santa Clara University's mission statement states that it will educate citizens and leaders of competence, conscience, and compassion, and cultivate knowledge and faith to build a more humane, just, and sustainable world. And so that is exactly what we must do. The more equality women have, the more empowered they become, and in turn, society furthers their cultural competence.
Now, it is our turn and responsibility to make a change for the better in our own campus community. We need to realize our biases and subconscious prejudices and make strides to a more equitable future. Sexism does not have to limit such an amazing university such as SCU, and working together, we can make all genders welcome and allow them to pursue their dreams.